Right now, we are going to go to a news conference. NYPD Commissioner James O'Neill talking about security for the rest of the week, including the World Pride Parade. Of course, a very important anniversary in New York because of the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in Greenwich Village. Let's listen in right now to Commissioner O'Neill.
And spectators alike. I'd just like to add that the NYPD, like our great city as a whole, should and does reflect the full story of our country, the richness and diversity and the uniquely American spirit that has always defined us. And our NYPD cops and civilians are honored to be part of what's happening here this week and this month, whether it's safeguarding the various Pride events or marching as members of our Gay Officers Action League. It truly is remarkable how far we've come as an organization and as a city in the last half century. We'll continue our efforts to make New York City the most diverse and inclusive city in the world. Chief Monahan.
Good afternoon. New York City cops have been doing an outstanding job keeping World Pride events safe throughout the entire month of June. There have been millions of visitors to our city to celebrate Pride, and New York's finest have kept them safe and, just as important, made them feel safe. This weekend will be no different as we turn our attention to the World Pride March, as well as numerous other events surrounding Pride over these next few days. Our cops will be out there to ensure everyone enjoys safely and does so without fear. This year's route is different from past marches. It steps off at 25th Street and 5th Avenue and continues south on 5th Avenue to 8th Street, where it turns right on Christopher Street, making its way towards the Stonewall Inn, before turning north onto 7th Avenue, culminating at 23rd and 7th Avenue. This year's march is approximately 2.5 miles long, nearly 3/4 of a mile longer than last year. There will be approximately 80,000 more marches this year and 42 more floats than there were last year. Also, for the first time, there will be a closing ceremony in Times Square that begins at 7 p.m. While the parade does not officially step off until noon, vehicle traffic in the area will be extremely restricted beginning at 4 a.m. Sunday. There will be absolutely no crosstown traffic from 8th Street to 33rd Street, from 8th Avenue as far as Park Avenue, beginning at 11:15 a.m. Crosstown closures will also be in effect from 46th Street to 56th Street, from 7th to 8th Avenue, beginning at 4 p.m. This is for the closing ceremonies that are going to be held in Times Square. There will be 19 pedestrian crossings along the route where officers are posted to ensure safe crossings. Pedestrians wanting to cross should look for the NYPD flags along the route that mark those crossing locations. These street closures mean we highly recommend the use of public transportation. Getting around in Manhattan on Sunday is going to be extremely difficult by car. Similar to other successful major events, these crosstown closures create a ring of security. At each, you will see block cars and sand trucks. I want to thank our partners at the Sanitation Department for helping with this vital work. At the parade, participants will see thousands of highly visible officers. In addition to the cops you see, there'll be plenty in plain clothes that you won't see. They'll be mixed in with the crowds to monitor for anything suspicious. We will deploy heavy weapon teams along the route from our ESU, CRC, and SRG commands. Vaporweight canines will also be posted, and officers will be out there equipped with radiation detectors. Our hate crimes task force investigators will be on the ground as well. We will also have eyes in the sky as aviation helicopters and rooftop surveillance teams monitor the large crowds. And we will utilize some of our newest technology. As members of the NYPD's Technical Assistance Response Unit will have a tethered drone in the air. Although we have more security assets for World Pride than years past, we still need the public's help. There'll be thousands of additional eyes and ears at the parade, and we rely on the public to report anything they believe to be out of the ordinary. Don't hesitate to tell a cop about something you believe to be suspicious, or to call our counterterrorism hotline at 188-NYC-SAFE. And of course, 911 if it's an emergency. This is certainly going to be a very long day for everyone, and I want to thank every cop that's going to be working this event. I'll be out there with you, and I'd like to thank the organizers, community leaders, business owners, and more who have been working hand in hand with everyone to ensure that everyone has a great time. Have fun, be safe, and stay aware out there. Thank you.
Jim Waters, Chief of Counterterrorism.
Once again, Sunday, the eyes of the world will be again on New York City. Since the beginning of the Pride Month, the Counterterrorism Bureau deployments at many high-profile LGBTQ events and locations throughout the city. From the opening ceremony tomorrow at Barclays, through the concert on Friday in front of the Stonewall Inn, to the parade, to the closing ceremonies in Times Square. What will you see? The entire route will be locked down with sand trucks and blocker vehicles. We will employ our counter-drone interdiction technology. So the TARU will be flying the drone, and we have technology that we've recently purchased, that we've developed. There'll be sensors out there throughout the area for the parade and for the closing ceremonies. We'll be able to identify whether or not a drone is flying, and we'll have some interdiction abilities. And an increase in our heavy weapons personnel from CRC, SRG, ESU, and more canines than last year. I'd also like to just point out that on June the 6th, as part of our SHIELD program and the pre-Pride, the first pre-Pride information session, we announced the Lavender Alliance. It is a partnership with the LGBTQ community of service providers. It's part of the neighborhood policing concept, the way we do business, our community outreach to build relationships and trust.
All right, thanks, Jim. Going to open it up to questions about the parade or any of the World Pride events. Rich?
Richard, do you feel this is an especially sensitive event, one that's truly more vulnerable than other events?
I don't know about vulnerability, but it is, it's a unique event. I think, Julian, it's about 2.5 million people are expected on the route, right? Yeah. So this is why we have, the security that's in place this year is a little different than last year. It's a bigger event and it's over a longer period of time. But this is what the NYPD does, each and every year, starting actually ending with New Year's Eve, going through all the parades, Halloween, Thanksgiving, tree lighting. This is a big part of what we do. Tony.
In terms of those other events, New Year's Eve, Thanksgiving, July 4th, in terms of the resources, personnel, and preparation, how does this compare?
Yeah, it's right up there. It's right up there with New Year's Eve. It's right up there with Thanksgiving. I mean, there's going to be thousands and thousands of members of the service, police officers through commissioners working on Sunday. It's a very important day for New York City. Rocco?
Does this route compared to the traditional Midtown parade routes pose any difficulties or obstacles that goes uptown or Midtown?
It's a different route. Some of the streets are not quite as wide, but that's okay. I mean, we've done this route before. We haven't gone back up 7th Avenue, but we are prepared. This is something we've been dealing with the organizers for almost a year, so we're ready for it.
Is there anything you learned from last year?
We learn from every event. Yep. Yeah, Dean.
You said there were no threats against private plans for the city at this moment, but what are you doing to dig deep? Because the last couple of terrorist attempts we have on the city, we did not know about it. Why do you need to?
All right. Yeah, John Miller. Yeah, John Miller will talk about that. John?
Sure.
In terms of this event, this is something that went on for years that we carried as a medium. It was about crowds, it was about traffic, it was about safety. Obviously after the Pulse nightclub attack in Orlando, we had to reassess what the event meant in terms of security posture, and it went from a medium, as the commissioner said, to a high, the kind of place we would put New Year's Eve, Thanksgiving Day parade, things that had been the subject of direct threats. Part of the landscape we deal in now is the traditional terrorist threat of the post 9/11 genre with ISIS and Al-Qaeda that have been fairly virulent and consistent with anti-LGBT messaging in their propaganda, as well as an emerging right-wing threat, which has a mixed bag of those threats too. So in this case, even though we've had discussions with organizers and community members about guarding against over-policing it and changing the character of the event, as Chief Waters said, what we've tried to do is create concentric circles and layers and layers and layers. Because, Dean, what you bring up is when your intelligence collection space is the distance between the mind of a potential attacker and the glowing screen of some computer where they're getting ideas, but they're not engaged with anybody else, that's a real challenge. But that's why the concentric circles, that's why the layered approach, that's why we did things we've never done before. We did a pre-Global Pride Week security briefing for LGBTQ community members to talk about the threat, talk about the dynamics and contours. If you see something, say something. It is why this week we have members of GOAL, the police officers associations from other departments coming all together with our people where we can give them a security brief and make them part of not just the basic eyes and ears, but the eyes and ears that have enhanced training and observation skills because they're law enforcement. And the idea is when you bring the circles together, you have that layered approach, you have that partnership with the out-of-town people, you've done the briefings for the community, you're making it easier to succeed against the threat and harder to succeed as the threat.
So, Dean, was that comprehensive enough? That's good? Yeah, sure. You want him to repeat that? Okay.
Another couple of minutes.
You have a follow-up?
Yeah, Tony, I'll get you next.
Maybe John,
You sure?
I'll start.
we talked about this drone interdiction technology. Is that going to be enable you to take control of a drone and take it to a safe place?
All right, we don't want to go too deep into it, but Jim?
So I'm not going to go deep into it, but the sensors will identify for us and alert us to a drone flying in the air, and then we will identify the user, and we'll interdict that. What we're mostly concerned about is because the technology is not quite there yet with drones in general, that if it loses its power source, if it loses its signal, it'll fall from the sky. So we'll worry more about public safety. And obviously, as we always look ahead at what's going on in other theaters in the world, we're obviously concerned about the terrorism aspect also.
All right, thanks, Jim. Yep. I think Terry spoke about this, and if you have anything to add when I'm done, go right ahead. But there's going to be 2.5 million spectators, so we ask each and every one of them to pay attention. You know, you're going to pay attention to what's going on in the route, but pay attention to what's going on around you, too. There's going to be cops everywhere, and if you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable, make sure you tell a cop. We're going to be there, and give us that chance to investigate and make sure we can do our best to keep everybody in the city safe. So this... What?
No, for regular parades, there are no restrictions coming out to the parade route itself. In Times Square, the closing ceremonies, there are pens set up. You'll go through a winding thing to get into the pens to see the closing ceremonies. I believe there's an event in Central Park that, again, you'll be winded to get into. But on the parade route itself, if you've ever been on that parade route, it's not much you should bring because it's very crowded. There's going to be 2.5 million people lined up. So I wouldn't suggest bringing a chair, but there's no objections to doing it.
Yep. Yeah, in the back.
You mentioned the other event, there's this alternative parade that's kind of overlaps a little bit with the main Pride Parade. I'm wondering, it's pre-liberation march, I'm wondering how that, if at all, played into the planning for this year's event.
Yeah, it has played into our preparation for both the march and the parade. But Terry, you want to talk a little bit more about it?
Again, that event steps off at 9:30 in the morning. We're not sure exactly how many people are going to participate in it. The Heritage of Pride people have been absolutely fantastic working with us to make sure that both events can come out and take place in the same area. The Reclaim Pride event should be past the start of the Heritage of Pride before that event starts. So we're not expecting any problems with it. But we will have police monitoring both events. And that's the one that ends up in Central Park.
Just to follow up, could I just get the Commissioner and Julian to comment on the fact that there is this alternative march that's expected to be pretty large, kind of offering a space that doesn't include corporations or police officers marching in the parade. What do you all make of that kind of being organized on this kind of significant occasion?
I think it's important that people get to express themselves freely in the United States and in New York City. So whatever we can do to facilitate that, we do. So I'm looking forward to a great Sunday. Julian, I don't know if you want to add something to it?
Sure. So at Heritage of Pride, we agreed that we wanted to allocate some of the space for Reclaim Pride to be able to do the Queer Liberation March. We believe that everyone has a platform to actually showcase what they believe in, and the community is a huge community. Everyone believes in different things, and so I think it's important to us to allow that to happen.
Rocco. Bill, you want to talk about that a little bit? Chief Aubrey will talk about that in a second.
Sorry, what was your question again? All right. Okay, so I have them broken down by gender and sexual orientation. So for the year, gender is 4 versus 4, so we're even, and sexual orientation, we're 22 versus 23, so we're actually down 1. Total, 26 versus 27, we're down 1 or 4%. We're seeing the biggest increase in assault, 8 this year versus 14 last year, so we're -6. And the increase is in criminal mischief, so that'd be like graffiti, damage to property, which is 7 versus 2, so +5. Yeah, that's still open. We have the flyer. This is the flyer. We'll give it out again today. We're looking for this individual. He went there and lit those flags on fire.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. Good question. So there are different events all over the city. There's an event at Barclays. There's an event in Times Square. There's an event up in Central Park. So it's important that, and we have 36,000 police officers, and many of them will be working from Thursday through Sunday, helping to protect all these events. So it's not just Manhattan-centric. We know where the events are, and we will do our best to work with all the organizers to make sure we keep people as safe as possible. Yep. You want us to turn it off? No, you sure? Okay, you sure? Okay. No, we have, and all the precinct operations, and if there are special events within those precincts, the borough people ensure that there's enough people there assigned to keep everybody safe. So, Rich.
Is the modified parade route symbolism or security reasons, or what was the thinking behind it?
Yeah. Terry's going to give you his thoughts.
That could be dangerous. Obviously, last year there were some complaints from where we started the parade. The local streets were kind of small for bringing in everybody, to getting all the floats and everything in. This is going to be so much larger. So we needed to change back up north, wider streets, able to get more floats. Like I said, 42 additional floats are going to be coming down, 80,000 additional marches to be able to disperse. We also didn't want to disperse down in the lower end, because that had been a problem a couple of years in the past, is that an overcrowding of people dispersing. So we wanted to loop back around to a wider area to make the dispersal easier. So this took literally between Corey Johnson, Heritage of Pride, all of us sitting together, putting our heads together to come up with this route, and this was the best solution.
Sure, yeah, sure.
I just want to piggyback on what was just said. It's really important to actually understand that this was a very long process. Like, we've been having this conversation over many years because we do anticipate millions of people. Like, we're actually looking at 5 million people, actually, anywhere between 5 to 6 million people in the city. A large chunk of that is going to be around the march route. It was important for us to work collaboratively. There were proposed routes that were put forward to us, and we had disagreed to those. It was important for us to make sure that Stonewall was part of the route. The AIDS Memorial Park was part of the route because these are important landmarks to the community. So we wanted to make sure that was included. But we also wanted to make sure safety was in part of that discussion. Also, we're talking about large crowds, and we wanted to make sure the route was able to accommodate those crowds we're talking about compared to usual marches that we organized in the years past. So it's a lot of different considerations. So that, in addition to working collaboratively with the elected officials and NYPD and other agencies, is really, really important to us. Sure, no problem. My name is Julian Sanjeevan. I'm the Pride March Director. I go by they, them, their pronouns.
Yep.
So we have, how many floats do we have this year and last year?
Again, it keeps fluctuating at this point. We're up to 129 this year. Last year, there was 87.
And roughly how many marchers this year and last year?
We're looking at potentially 130,000 marches. Last year, 46,000.
And spectators last year versus this year?
We're talking, listen, the numbers can go back and forth. He said 2.5, he's saying 5 million,
say
so
millions.
millions.
And the route is longer this year than last year?
3/4 of a mile.
Yeah, it's 3/4 of a mile longer.
It's 2.5 miles long this year?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Last call on Pride questions. All right, thank you. We're going to do off topic in a second. We just got to reset, all right? Thanks, Julian.
Good job, Billy.
So we have been listening to a press conference by the NYPD talking about this week's and specifically Sunday's events, the World Pride March on Sunday in Manhattan. And of course, the NYPD security issue, very important. This is the first time World Pride has been held in New York, coinciding with the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall uprising at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village. A couple of things that stuck out here. John Miller, Deputy Commissioner of the NYPD's Intelligence and Counterterrorism, talked about the march. Again, 2.5 million plus people. And putting it in perspective of the world we live in, specifically in the couple of years since the Pulse nightclub mass shooting in Florida, the gay nightclub, 2016, 49 people were murdered, dozens others were wounded. And Miller said because of that and the post-9/11 world we are in, the security level has gone from a medium level in the city to a high level for what the NYPD will be doing to protect participants and everybody in the city during these events over the next few days, and specifically the biggest event on Sunday. He says this march is up there with New Year's Eve preparation and the Thanksgiving Day parade. Also, just talking about some of the differences this year, one of them being the parade route, 2.5 miles long. It steps off in the morning near Madison Square Park. It kind of makes a big U shape. Can you see, sort of, kind of makes a big U shape in Manhattan, and it ends at 23rd Street and 7th Avenue. How about the number of people and floats? 129 floats. 130,000 marchers. All right, that's a lot of people. Also, because of that, the Chief of Department Monahan talking about all the street closures. This really, he said, not a day to be driving in Manhattan. Sunday, 4 a.m., the street closures begin. No crosstown traffic from 8th Street to 33rd Street, from 8th Avenue to Park Avenue. A really big grid closed to car traffic. They will also, as they have treated other large events, have sand trucks and street blockers around to keep this area protected, and thousands of uniformed officers will be working, plainclothes officers. heavy weapons units through the CRC Critical Response Command, SRG's Strategic Response Group, and Emergency Services Unit. They'll have more K-9 unit, Hate Crimes Task Force, helicopters in the sky, NYPD drones also. And so we're hearing about all of this security. And also it was interesting to hear Commissioner O'Neill, just as he began this, setting the tone for this being, such an important day for the city, for World Pride, and also about acceptance. And it kind of comes off of course, what he said last week or 2 weeks ago when he was talking about he apologized for the NYPD and their raids and actions 50 years ago at the Stonewall Inn, and that was such an important moment for so many. So there you have it. We will continue on covering this on CBSN New York and later today on CBS 2 News. Stay with us here on CBSN New York. I'm Dana Tyler.